Hello, listeners, and welcome to the third and final part of this mini-series on the Church of Jesus Christ Forever, also known as the Perfect Church. In part 2, Jesse described his difficult childhood growing up in a church that skewed scripture and abused its congregants. In part 2, Jesse explored his multiple attempts to escape this life, taking drastic measures to break free. In this third and final part, we will look at Jesse's rebirth and ultimate escape from the group, creating a beautiful life for himself in adulthood. If you would like to listen to this episode or any future episodes in full, ad-free with early access, you can sign up to patreon.com/the Cult Vault to support the show from as little as £1 a month. Some wording in this episode has been muted due to its derogatory nature, and please note that there is a trigger warning of potentially offensive language and child abuse. Now, here is Jesse.
There's so many thoughts that I've had during your story. A lot of the time when I ask people what advice they would give to others who are looking to leave a high controlling environment, a lot of the time it's not as easy as just walking away for all of the reasons that you've listed and all of the struggles that you experienced. No money, no identification, no contacts outside of the environment, no support system. And despite all of those things, you still left. You made yourself homeless and you were begging on the streets. You steal from people. You start stealing from people. And then you have this thought that the church is right, that you are bad because you've been caught by the police, but you've only put yourself into a position of stealing from people because you needed a way to get out of that environment.
Oh, in the church's mind, I'm still, the worst person on earth. So I'm worse because, there's a verse in the Bible that talks about it's better to have known or to have not known the word of God or whatever than to have known it and leave it. So in their mind, I am bad. I am a bad person because I have known, quote unquote, the truth of who this church is and, how important they are. And I've walked away from it.
Wow, Jesse, you've had such a wild experience inside this group, not only because of how strange the group are to begin with, but everything that's happened to you personally. You stole a car. I mean, that's what you were pushed into doing. That's pretty significant. I mean, you obviously you've served time for it, but that's something that will impact your life forever, having a prison record. Is that something that you've found since leaving prison?
Yes, my current job, I got out in 2008, so it's been 14 years. And my current job that I've had for just under a year, I had to pull aside one of the managers and state like, hey, I was 18. I obviously don't go through everything. I don't go through all the details about why I went to prison, but I say like, hey, I was 18. I'm 35 right now. That was half my life ago. And so if this record means I don't get this job, that's ridiculous. And obviously, that showed up on my background check. And so I have to have conversations with people to talk about employment. And that's really unfortunate because that record never goes away. I'm not going to sit there and explain to every potential employer about why I went to prison. I just say I was a kid.
You also mentioned that you were a well-behaved inmate.
Oh, absolutely. I acted out in school quite a bit. I was in a very small town, so anything that I did, everyone knew about. School was my place to escape. So I wasn't paying attention at school at all. I did poorly in high school and in middle school. I was abused at home, and school was my way to get rid of my tension, to act out, to be myself, to
not be monitored 24/7.
Yeah, right. And so I definitely got in trouble at school.
Once you return back to the church and they give you this session of public shaming and you realize that actually nothing has changed in the church in the last 3 years, what does your journey look like from that moment up to our conversation today?
So life, when I returned home, when I got out, was very scary. I had so much pressure on me to not fail. In the church's eyes, if I failed, that meant that 3 years of prison was just pointless. I didn't learn anything. I mean, I was being asked to not be human. I was being asked to be absolutely perfect. And so I was just deathly afraid of screwing up when I got home, because I needed to prove that 3 years of prison taught me something. Obviously I failed. I'm human. Obviously I screwed up. I did stupid stuff. I said things, I did things, whatever. I'm a human. I'm going to mess up. But I had this pressure on me, and they put this pressure on me, the church. And so so I got out in May 29th, 2008. And I ended up leaving November 16th, 2008. So those months right there were just really, really tough. It wasn't as abusive because I was older, and I would never have allowed that. Should someone have, put their hands on me, especially coming from such an aggressive place, like prison. I just wasn't going to allow someone to do that. But I definitely went through a lot of spiritual abuse, emotional, mental. And so, we had the meetings and all the things. And so came to a point where I was not moving forward with my life. Everything was stagnant. The church was the church, they were still a cult, and beliefs hadn't changed, and practices either. And so finally in November, I decided I needed to leave, excuse me. So I had like run away, I guess, every other time before. I'd snuck out in the middle of the night. So this time I was gonna do it differently. And so I got on the phone with the pastor. And so when I got out of prison, my dad had passed away. My younger brother was in Hawaii, and so it was my mom, myself, and my younger sister. And so we moved to a nearby town, because that's where I was going to be working. So every weekend we would head back over to Oregon, Illinois, and spend the weekend there, either staying at someone's house for the weekend, or and then coming back on a Sunday night so we can start the new week. So when I finished work and I finished work, I called the pastor. I said, hey, I don't want to come down for the weekend. I want to just kind of think things through. And so that was supposed to be my plan, to try to find a place to live. And, he instantly became aggressive and told me to, state why, like, why do you want to leave? What do you want to do? You need to tell me right now. And so I said, well, I just don't agree with some things, and I don't do well under pressure. So my reasoning wasn't that good. I said, I need access to my money. I had a full-time job, and they were taking my money, and I just didn't have it. And so I said, also, you guys are just trying to control me, and I can't do this anymore. And so he said, if you don't come down for the weekend, I'm going to tell your mom to kick you out of the house. So I said, all right, well, I'm leaving the church. So I hung up the phone, and I drove home, and I knew that my mom was going to get a phone call. So as soon as I walked in the door, I said, hey, I'm staying home for the weekend. I started to walk by her, and the phone rang. So I knew it was coming. So I ran downstairs, and I packed my bags, and in the middle of it, my mom ran downstairs, and she was crying. And, she said, I just lost her dad, and now I got you back, and you're leaving again. And so there's a level of guilt and shame I felt at leaving. And so I said, I have to do this. I need to leave. So I finally left. And that night I slept on the floor of a coworker's house. And I remember, I should back up a second. So before I left my mom's house, I remember walking out of the door and just kind of leaving her sobbing. And I was so torn apart. I was so sad that this is what I needed to do. But it was just heart-wrenching to look back and see my mom just standing there by herself, sobbing, alone. And it was, if I could have stayed and life would have been different, just for the sake of my mom not being there alone, I would have stayed.
That's the catch, isn't it? Life would have had to have been different.
Yep. There's no way it would have changed. It would have gotten worse. I couldn't do it. So there had to be heartbreak, and there had to be pain for me to be able to leave the church. And that is honestly one of the moments that I regret the most, is leaving my mom stand there. I wish there had been a better way to do it, but I didn't know that there was. So I left her, headed to a coworker's house where I slept on the floor. And I remember thinking, or, wondering, is this what life is going to be like? I'm sleeping on the floor of a coworker's house. Is this what life is like outside of the church? Like, this is for good. This isn't me going down to Florida again. This isn't me going to prison. This is me making that final decision, knowing that I will never return to the church. But is this what it's going to be? The church had often stated, that I'll be homeless, or that I'll do this or that. And this could potentially be the start of it. Wow. It wasn't. I continued working, and I had control of my own money. I was able to finally make my own decisions and believe what I needed to believe. And I got my own apartment, and I was so proud. Like, this was my apartment. This is my place that no one could ever take away from me. And it was just the happiest moment. Reconnected with my best friends who had also been in the church, but had left when I was in prison. And just amazing. And I'm still friends with them today. They are my absolute friends. They're my brothers. I've been through so much. We've all been through so much, and it's amazing. I love them to death, and they're the ones that brought me out of the church. They're the ones that guided me and helped me to be successful in being this cult.
Oh, Jesse, that's so lovely to hear. Are they aware of the abuses that you were subjected to? You've spoken at length to them about all of those things.
Yep. They're aware of everything, and they've supported me every step of the way.
Did your criminal activity make sense to them after you explained everything that had been happening to you at that point?
Absolutely. Yes. We all knew what I needed to do. They understand that my family was treated the worst, and I, above everyone else, was treated just worse than everyone, and we randomly have an ex-member state like, oh, I was treated the worst. And they've come to my defense and have stated that you don't understand what Jesse went through. You have no idea. Like, I have to live the rest of my life with a criminal record, and that is directly because of the church. Yeah. So I will always have it worse than anyone else. And that is not a pity party on me. I'm successful right now. I have made something out of my life, and I'm really happy. It took me a while to go back to church, but the first few churches I went to, I just walked out of. Couldn't be in there. And then I decided that I wanted to do some type of like mission work. Like, I wanted to feel like I was like helping someone. And so I went on these volunteer trips around the world. And that is where I met my wife. We were in Africa, and I was the project coordinator for incoming and outgoing volunteer groups, and she came in on a volunteer group. Wow. So I like to tell people that that I was her boss, and she will adamantly deny that. Yeah.
And you keep looking to the side. She's in the room with you now?
She's not here. I'm smiling out of the window because I know that she will hear this and obviously deny it.
Oh, and of course she's privy to all of this.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yep. She's my biggest supporter. She's amazing. She's been with me every step of the way. We've been married for 5 years now. And our little dog Squirrel, and it's our little family.
Oh, Jesse, I love that. I love that so much. You left the church, went back to the church, left the church, went back to the church. And every time you never had that support network from your family, from your church peers, from teachers in school who maybe should have noticed something. I mean, if a kid doesn't go to school here in the country, social services and school boards and people get involved. It's actually against the law. So
teachers never did anything. They suspected, and this year when there's a lot of stuff happening with the church, they ended up coming forward and saying, hey, we thought that there's something going on and maybe we should have spoken up, but we didn't know.
Yeah, I think that there's sort of since the early 2000s, there's been a lot more teacher training around, awareness of child abuse in various forms, not just physical abuse or sexual abuse. At least I hope that's the case across the whole world in terms of trying to be more progressive in protecting children from abusers. One question I did have, you said before, I'm human. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm not perfect. Nobody in the church was. Nobody is. All of the people in that church were perfect. So surely they must have made mistakes at times and had to be held accountable for not being perfect themselves.
They were, yes, there were definitely people that were held accountable to, some of their actions. I didn't see a lot of those because those were all behind closed doors. I'd heard randomly here and there of different things, but I don't believe that they admit to their mistakes. They're all justified in some regard, like God showed that we should do this. And if it doesn't work out, oh, well, God didn't allow it to work out because of this. So, there's a person in the church that had cancer. Well, then one of my friends had cancer, but the church approached my friend and said, you have cancer and you need to pray so you don't die. And you have cancer because, of your sin or whatever. Well, what about this person who's still in the church? What about that? Or what about the pastor who might be having any, some type of ailments? Like, what about that? What do you think about that?
Double standards across the board.
Yes.
So you mentioned filing police reports. You mentioned that there's a group of you. And you also mentioned that the pastor is still leading the church. So talk us through that whole segment of your leaving and your deconstruction, and then also where the church stands today.
When I left, I believe that there are good people in the church. There are very good people. And I believe that they are victims, some of them. And so when I left, I knew that if I immediately filed police report, that some of those people would, be subject to punishments that I didn't necessarily want to have them be subject to, I guess. They would be affected very negatively. And maybe that was a mistake. It probably was. And so I let time go by and, not doing anything. And then this year, there was kind of like a Facebook debacle where some comments were posted and then a lot of us came forward to corroborate the information that was being presented. And then I, started listing a lot, if you guys, to the church, if you guys are going to deny what I'm saying, I have absolutely no problem telling you how wrong you are. You understand. And you were there, when a lot of the things that happened to me happened, and you were some of my abusers. So if you want me to, I will state my, my abuses, which I did. And they, they never specifically stated this, like, we never held a knife to Jesse. They never have said that they didn't do that. They just say that Jesse's lying, So I've asked them specifically, why don't you, since you're telling me that I'm lying publicly, why don't you publicly state, did you do this or did you do that? And they refuse. So we, a few of us decided to file charges, criminal charges. And while the police were investigating, there's, it's Facebook, it's social media. So there's a debacle, a lot of back and forth stuff, a lot of information being put out there. And I began writing a book. And so I began doing some research and interviewing a lot of people. And so I've learned a lot more about the background of the pastor and just a lot of stuff about the pastor that a lot of people don't know. It just doesn't not make sense that there are 50 people who are willing to follow him if they knew everything that he had done before he was a pastor. Yeah. So unfortunately, there is a statute of limitations, and the statute of limitations is passed, and so the church cannot be held accountable for the things that they've done.
to you, that's not to say that there isn't abuse of other children taking place right now.
Right. And that's what needs to happen, is more people need to leave the church. However, their access to social media is very limited, and they will probably never hear this podcast ever.
There is a chance that even though you can file these police reports, and even though the statute of limitations has passed, there is a chance that you and the others who are speaking out and putting this information across social media and on public forums might be heard by other people who are being subjected to similar abuses. There is still that chance.
Yes.
And it's so important to understand that, to realize that, and know that you could save somebody's life by allowing them to know that they're not on their own, and that there are other people who have experienced these things, and that you can become somebody who is loved and cared for and appreciated and successful in life in the way that you feel you are successful. Whatever success means to you, I think that's different to each people, but you're living an honest life now in your own place with a wife and a dog. You have your own family, so that to you is success, and I think that's beautiful. And so you, just because the statute of limitations has passed, can't stop now. You've picked up that torch, and you have to run with it. You're writing your book. You have to keep going.
Oh yeah, this doesn't end. Like they can't keep me quiet. I mean, it's not going to happen.
And if the church is so scared of you, or if the church is so angry with you, or however they perceive you, there's a chance that they might talk about you in some of these meetings, and just having your name thrown out there might mean that somebody has a place to start on searching you up on the internet, if they ever have access to it in school, or whatever that looks like for them. So I don't think it's in the realm of impossible to think that there's a chance that some people in this environment could hear about your activism, and that's so important. Do you think you'll ever share this podcast with your mum or your siblings?
Oh, 100%. Yes. With my siblings, yes. With my mom, I want my mom to hear this. Absolutely. My mom has been in the church for a very, very long time, most of her life. She joined when she was in her 20s. She's 70 something now. So it's all she's known. I would love it if this could have a very, positive impact on her, and kind of persuade her to realize the things that have happened, and understand where I'm coming from. But I don't know that I'm very optimistic about it creating a pathway for her to leave, because again, it's all she's ever known. And this is her family. If she were to leave now, this would be to deny every single thing that she's ever learned and believed and done.
And her whole community and social life and everything that she's sort of integrated with.
Yep.
This will be the first time that your siblings will hear in detail some of your experiences, though?
No. So my siblings know. Okay. My siblings are the ones who have left the church are aware of, of my experiences. I have my younger brother. I don't believe that he has access to. I can't imagine how he would have access to this. The church keeps him on a very short leash. If somehow he was to hear this, he's still part of the cult. He still believes that, anything that the church says. So I don't know that he would accept this. That's the problem, is the brainwashing that goes on and the control of information.
For anybody listening who is perhaps trying to work out a way to escape their own high demand group, or people who are struggling with the aftermath of leaving a high demand group in the way that you did many times before you finally severed those ties, what would you say to those people?
I think that shame and fear are terrible weapons that, people have been using for just thousands of years. I don't think that you need to feel shamed about why you believe what you believe, or why you chose to find your own pathway, rather than, allow someone to force you down their path. I don't think that you have to live in fear of retribution or fear of failure simply because you believe something different, or simply because you don't believe what someone is telling you. You get to decide who you are and what you're becoming. We all have free will, and no person has the right to take that from us. Yeah, there are millions of people who are alive today who have been through what we've been through, what you've been through, and we hear you and we see you.
And for anybody listening who might be somebody that knows you personally and is hearing about your experiences for the first time, perhaps people that are still in the church, do you have anything that you would say to them?
You don't have to be scared. I mean, anyone in the church, you don't have to be scared. You don't have to be afraid. You can think for yourself. You're allowed to. No one gets to tell you what to think.
No, and nobody's perfect.
No, nobody is perfect. You're talking about a man. If I were to take the Bible and as truth, there's one person in the Bible who ever stated, who was ever perfect. In all of time, Jesus was the only person that was perfect. You're telling me that Kalialuli of the Church of Jesus Christ Forever is perfect. However many people that have ever been on this planet, Kalialuli is the person who is perfect. The second person in the world that has ever been perfect. Can't tell me that.
And just lastly, for anybody listening that does know your story and who has been an ally and supporter of yours that might be tuning into this episode, is there anything that you'd like to say to them just to end on a nice positive note?
Yes, you are welcome. I'm here to welcome you. You guys are loved. You're more than welcome. You have a home here.
What about your friends and your wife who might be tuning in?
I love you so much. You guys are amazing.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Jesse, for joining us today. I had absolutely no idea the extent of the roller coaster that you were going to take me and the listeners on today. And I appreciate you coming here to talk about things openly and honestly. I know it can't be difficult to relive some of the abuses that you went through and to come and openly admit that you were at one point a convicted felon. And I know that a lot of people wouldn't want to be open and honest about the parts of their lives that painted themselves in a way that, we've been talking about some of the church and the church members. And to really understand the whole picture of what you went through, it's important to have that information and just to see the lengths that the church would drive you to. Have you been in trouble with the police since?
No, not at all. And the pastor told me that I would end up back in prison, but it's been 14 years. So no, I have not.
Well, I mean, Jesse, there is still time.
Yes, there's still time.
But yeah, I'm hoping that that's sincerely a joke that I've just made. So I just appreciate you. I appreciate your time. And I know that this episode is going to strike true with some of the listeners and be a really interesting listen for anybody that tunes in. It's been a wild ride. So thank you so much, Jesse. I appreciate you. And I really hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me.
Take care, Jesse. Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of this mini-series on the Church of Jesus Christ Forever, also known as Perfect Church. If you would like to listen to this episode or any future episodes in full, ad-free with early access, you can sign up at patreon.com/The Cult Vault to support the show from as little as £1 a month. To get in touch, you can find me at